Do you hate large corporations, but yet buy your Starbucks? Do you mention fascism on a regular basis? Well, then you might be in the market for a used Nissan Juke. Well, surprise, we're talking about a big corporation today, and it's Nissan. This is a 2012 Nissan Juke all-wheel drive, and they are one of the quirkiest cars I have ever laid my eyes on. We're gonna talk about the styling more here in a moment, as well as the reliability on these cars. We, on our buy or bust decision today, are gonna decide if these cars, if you buy one with 150,000 miles like this one, will make it to 250 or 300,000 miles. We're gonna take a walk around the outside. We're gonna talk about the common problems, and then we are gonna decide if the Nissan Juke is a buy or a bust. I hope you had your coffee this morning because we are doing a walk around on the Juke. Let me know what you think of the styling on these cars. I think that they are truly one of the, let's just say quirky. Let's use the word quirky so I'm not completely bashing it. But I do not love the design language that Nissan used on these vehicles. There's a few dings and dents around as you'd expect on a used car. The paint actually shines pretty decent, and I did not notice a ton of cosmetic issues on the outside. I'm actually surprised how well they have held up. One thing I did notice, even though these headlights are cleaned up and not terribly oxidized, there is some cracking in the lenses just from the sun wearing out the plastic there. So that's something to look out for as these age. Otherwise, looks aside, it looks pretty good for its age and miles. Under the hood of our Juke here, we got a 1.6 liter turbo engine. Makes 188 horsepower and 177 pound-feet of torque. I actually don't hate those numbers for a car of this size. I think that should give it plenty of get up and go, but we'll talk about that more on the test drive there. But it actually is a kind of a fun sort of sounding, quick revving little engine, at least sitting here in the parking lot. Now, if you're looking at a used one of these, there's one main thing on these earliest Jukes that you definitely want to listen for, and that is what the engine sounds like when it's cold on startup. Make sure there's no rattling. This is a timing chain engine, and on the early years, they did have some issues with timing chain premature wear, tensioners, things like that, and that is basically going to result in catastrophic engine failure eventually. While it might not be tomorrow or anything like that, you want to listen and make sure you don't hear any crazy sounds coming from the side of the engine that sound like a chain rattling. The next thing that is somewhat common on these is around 150, 200,000 miles, and you've heard this if you've listened to any of my recent videos on smaller cars with turbo engines, is turbo wear. And these turbos can fail, and they usually will be using a fair amount of oil. You get a little bit of smoke out the back. You'll notice kind of when they're starting to fail, lack of power, just general running rough, things like that. So you'll probably find that out, but definitely make sure that the turbo sounds good, that you can hear it a little bit, not any crazy sounds, and that there's no smoke or excessive oil consumption if you're looking at a used one. The last real two mechanical things with the engine that we need to look out for if we're looking at a used one of these is with the fuel system. This is a direct injection engine, and now on any car that has direct injection, carbon buildup is a real concern. However, these even more so. This means that you will have to sort of tear into the engine a little bit and clean up the carbon buildup inside the engine, or you'll have a lack of power, rough idles, just general problems with the engine. The other is the fuel injectors themselves are known to fail on these as well. So if you have a misfire, it could be carbon buildup, could be a bad injector. The last thing before we move on to the transmission is motor mounts. If you notice a serious clunk or anything like that, or if the motor is moving a lot inside the engine bay here, if you shift it back between reverse and drive, anything like that, you probably have some failing motor mounts. Those aren't terribly expensive. Most cars have an issue with that at 100 or 150,000 miles, but it is something to look out for. Moving on to the transmission. Now, this is a CVT. Nissan calls it an Xtronic CVT transmission. Doesn't really matter. But if you know anything about CVT transmissions, a lot of people are not fans of them. Some people for how they drive, some people for their reliability and or maintenance. There's one brand out there that has a reputation for having really terrible CVTs and kind of gave all of them a bad name, and that's Nissan. They were one of the early adopters, and they did not have great success rates. These transmissions, unfortunately, are not great either, and they can have basically any amount of issues. Maintenance is absolutely key on these to prevent things like revving up randomly, shudders, just overall feeling kind of wonky. I don't know another way to say it because they do feel different than a regular like 5 or 6 speed transmission. And so really you got to take them on a good long test drive. And if you are an owner of these cars or a buyer of one, you got to maintain the fluid changes on those transmissions for sure, but just make sure that it seems to run as it should on a test drive. Now this Juke is an all-wheel drive, which most of the time would be the more desirable option for a vehicle. People want to have all-wheel drive. In the Juke, the front-wheel drive ones are actually more desirable because the all-wheel drive systems in these are overly complicated and have a variety of problems. I don't have time in this video to really go over everything, but there is a few little things that you could do if you are a buyer for one of these cars, and that is there's a coupling on the rear differential that is known to go bad, and also just take the car on a nice flat paved driveway or parking lot, something like that, and just make sure that it's actually engaging all the wheels with no crazy clunks. If there's any lights on the dash for the all-wheel drive system, I would absolutely steer clear of that car because you're probably in for expensive repairs. Moving on to the interior now of our Nissan Juke. And you would expect the interior to be quite quirky to match the quirkiness of the outside. And honestly, they didn't really do that. It is a very kind of normal feeling small car interior here. I really don't have too much wear and tear. I'm kind of impressed, actually. Normally, I would think that I would have more things to complain about, but the seats are still supportive. The foam isn't all worn out. Dash is not cracked, nothing like that. The only thing that I would say as far as a real complaint is that it is extremely hard plastic, cheap feeling inside, like most small cars, so I really can't fault them too much. Other things not so much exactly interior or cosmetically related. One is the outside door handles are known to break and fail over time. Pretty common issue on these cars. This particular car, the air conditioning doesn't work. That's not a super common complaint that I've seen, at least from Juke owners out there, but this car, the AC does not work. Other things as I'm just looking around the interior, one is this has an aftermarket armrest in the center console because the car did not come with them originally, and that's an extremely popular upgrade for Juke owners. Just a little bite of information there. And they did do some pretty cool stuff with the radio and the climate control. They look a little bit more modern than most vehicles in 2012. At this point, they're both quite dated, but you can see at least back in the day, they tried to add a few fun little touches to the inside of the Juke. Backseat of the Juke here, and this is an area where obviously it's a small car, but the space is quite tight. My head at 5'9" is almost touching the ceiling. I have this seat where I would sit up front, and my knees are touching the back of it. The seat itself is somewhat comfortable, and it's hard plastic everywhere back here. As far as features, not a lot. You got cup holders in the door, no USB, nothing like that. You're just along for the ride in the back seat of the Juke. Moving on to the trunk area of our Juke here, and it is not large. There's nothing underneath this level right here. It is just your spare tire. You kind of need that along with you. As far as actual features, you do have a Rockford Fosgate subwoofer back here. So they did do some fun stuff for the younger crowd with these cars, which would probably be one of their typical buyers. If you actually needed to pack things for 5 people inside here, this trunk isn't really large enough to do it. Pulling out onto the highway now in our Nissan Juke. And we do have a straight stretch of road, so I guess we're gonna get on it and see how that CVT holds up to this power. Okay, transmission is weird. I mean, that's just a fact. The transmission is weird in these cars. I don't know that there's anything wrong with this one, but it is weird, and there's actually some torque steer that I'm feeling in the front. So it's a little bit of a surprise when you get on the gas hard. I will say that the actual power was pretty decent. I didn't really have any complaints there as far as actual power. Now, as far as fuel economy, that's going to be an important thing for anybody who's buying one of these. And it's rated at 25 and 30, which is not great, not terrible. I mean, it's a little all-wheel drive SUV. So, can't hate on it too much, but there is much better options out there nowadays. I do have one thing to say, though, about the fuel economy, and that is these are a premium vehicle. Nissan requires premium fuel for these. So even though you're getting 30 miles to the gallon, you're going to be spending a little bit more at the pump because you have to put in premium fuel. Now, typical Nissan stuff is typical with these two, and that is suspension stuff wearing out around 100, 150,000 miles. Anything ball joints, sometimes CV axles, struts if you notice a clunk. The steering in this is fairly tight. And actually, now that I'm not on it hard like I was at the beginning, the steering actually feels pretty decent. I don't hate it. I'm just going to accelerate normally now to feel how the transmission operates in just kind of a normal driving situation. And right there, it feels pretty good. It still feels like a CVT, but I didn't have any sort of crazy... It did rev up a little bit on the harder pull there. So, and now as you're going downhill, the transmission actually kind of holds you back. It's kind of a good thing, but it is different. One thing I did not mention when we were under the hood, and I should have, is that there is a beautiful little check engine light on this guy. And it's just for an EVAP. So you can have some issues with the EVAP, the emission systems on these cars as well. That is typical across all manufacturers, and I'm not hating on Nissan too much because of that. Now, if you do have a ABS or traction control light on, it is probably a wheel bearing. They are pretty famous for wheel bearings going bad, or if you just have a humming sound. Overall, as I'm cruising around, I actually kind of don't hate the car. It drives a little bit better than I thought that it would, but I think I just have some concerns on the reliability. Back from the test drive, and the test drive went actually better than maybe I expected. It actually drove okay, and the transmission didn't feel like it was falling out from under the car like most Nissans. And it was a little uncomfortable not having any air conditioning, and we have the nice, beautiful glow of the check engine light to illuminate our path. Now, the market on these cars is around $5,000 or $6,000 with 150,000 miles on. I do think if they were reliable, that would actually be a pretty good steal. I think they would maybe be okay. I mean, looks aside, that's a subjective thing, but they are definitely a quirky option out there on the market. My biggest concern, though, is not the quirkiness, it's the reliability. And we've already gone over that you can have a problem with just about every system on these cars. That's why today my decision is fairly easy. These cars are a bust. I do not feel like in most cases these are going to make it to 250 or 300,000 miles without having major issues. I think the price out on the market also reflects that. I think that's why they aren't as expensive as some of the other options out there of similar cars in this class. And I think generally you should probably pick another option. If you have one of these and had a great experience, though, I want to hear about that. Or if you think I missed something, I want to hear about that too. Put your experience with these cars down in the comments below. I will read and I would love to hear all about it. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.